Welcome to Life Stories, where one man spent 18 years building a company's beating heart, only to be discarded like yesterday's blueprint. What happens when the invisible architect, the one everyone forgot, decides not to save the crumbling empire he once built? This isn't a story about revenge. It's about something far rarer: dignity, legacy, and the quiet power of walking away. Stay with us, because what starts with a simple betrayal will unfold into a battle for identity, respect, and redemption, one choice at a time. Let's begin. Nathan Cross sat across the glass table, his knuckles brushing the manila envelope they'd slid toward him. Outside the 12th story window, the endless gray of Lake Michigan bled into the afternoon sky, a seamless, indifferent horizon. Inside, Jason Reed, the newly minted CTO with his designer frames and polished MBA sheen, leaned back in his chair with the smug assurance of a man who had never had to build anything with his own hands. "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary," Jason said, almost smiling. "Nothing personal, just business." Nathan didn't flinch. He had spent 18 years carving CoreView properties out of digital bedrock. Lines of code, hidden redundancies, silent protections no one had ever noticed because they had never needed to. His work had become invisible, like oxygen, taken for granted until the moment it was gone. Now, to these suits, he was just another outdated cost. Megan Ford from HR fidgeted with her tablet. "The severance package is generous," she said too brightly, as if generosity could sanitize betrayal. Nathan nodded once, picked up the envelope without looking inside, and stood. Jason seemed almost disappointed. "Is that all you have to say?" he pressed. Nathan paused, considering. 1,000 words boiled beneath his ribs, but he simply said, "Good luck." He packed his career into a single battered box: a few framed photos, a stack of old architecture blueprints, a soldered prototype circuit board from the early days when CoreView had been nothing more than shoreline realty and a dream. His colleagues avoided his eyes as he walked out. Some mumbled awkward goodbyes. Most just pretended to work, hoping the axe wouldn't find them next. The parking garage was silent but for the soft slap of his shoes against concrete. As he loaded the box into his truck, his phone buzzed. A text from Eric Dawson, the quiet, fiercely loyal database administrator he'd hired a decade ago. "Vic, the whole system's freaking out." Nathan stared at the screen for a long moment, then put the phone down without replying. At home, Claire was waiting on the back deck, 2 glasses of bourbon catching the last of the sun's fire. She didn't ask questions, only placed a hand on his shoulder as he sat down beside her, the world bleeding orange and gold over the lake. "What will you do now?" she asked. Nathan swirled the bourbon slowly, watching the light fracture against the glass. "Something will turn up," he said. What Jason hadn't realized, what no one at CoreView had bothered to understand, was that Nathan had built their world by hand, carving logic into the bones of their business, weaving invisible safety nets only he knew how to maintain. He had asked for a documentation team for years, but it had always been deemed too expensive. Now, every secret, every hidden fault line lived only inside his mind, and he wasn't planning to share. The first voicemail came 2 weeks later. Jason's voice, strained, pretending to be casual. "Nathan, we're having a few hiccups with the tenant portal. The junior team could use some quick guidance. Just a short consultation." He deleted it. By evening, there were 5 more messages. Megan, Eric, even Tyler Brennan, son of the company's founder, who had once promised Nathan he had a job for life. The system was collapsing. Payments frozen, maintenance requests lost, data backups inaccessible. He didn't answer. Instead, he stared out over Lake Michigan, the water cold and endless, and felt a strange peace settle into his bones. The offer came the next day, $300 an hour. Consulting, temporary, urgent. He said he'd think about it. Then, a knock at the door. Jason Reed himself, looking ragged, tie askew, desperation oozing from every pore. "Nathan, please, everything's down. Residents are furious. Westbrook Holdings is threatening to pull their contracts. We need you." Nathan listened, nodded, closed the door without a word. That night, as the wind rattled the windows, another opportunity arrived. An email from Daniel Hawthorne at Horizon Systems. Corview's hungry, up-and-coming competitor. I heard about what happened. We've admired your work for years. Would you be willing to talk? Nathan smiled for the first time in weeks. When he met Daniel the next afternoon in a low-key coffee shop downtown, there were no hollow apologies, no cost-cutting excuses, just an offer, chief systems architect, full benefits, stock options, a salary that made Corview's look like pocket change. But it wasn't about the money. You don't want the flash, Daniel said, stirring his coffee. You want the foundation, something real, something that lasts. Nathan nodded. It was all he had ever wanted. He signed the contract that evening. Meanwhile, Corview hemorrhaged. Eric kept him updated in terse texts, system failures, irate tenants, legal threats. Westbrook Holdings, their biggest client, was circling the drain, ready to jump ship. Jason called again and again, and finally, with a voice brittle and breaking, offered Nathan anything. Double his old salary, a signing bonus, full control of the system rebuild. Nathan listened quietly, then said the words Jason had never thought he'd hear. I'm under exclusive contract now. I'm not coming back. You knew this would happen, Jason said bitterly. You built it to fall without you. Nathan's voice was cold, clean, like the winter air sweeping off the lake. No, I built it to last, with the right hands. He hung up, hands steady, heart unburdened. The fall was just beginning. What would you have done in Nathan's place? Help rebuild the world you were cast out of, or let it fall and build a new one? Do you believe loyalty is owed to those who discard you? As Corview's empire crumbles and a new legacy rises, Nathan will face a choice even more dangerous than revenge: mercy. Continue to part 2. Nathan sat alone in his new office at Horizon Systems, the city skyline sprawling outside the window, sharp and endless against the evening sky. The buzz of a team building something new hummed in the air, a sound he had almost forgotten he loved. Yet tonight, the sense of peace he'd earned was fractured, unsettled. An envelope sat unopened on his desk, heavier than it looked. Eric Dawson had slid it to him during lunch, face tight with something unsaid. You should see this, Eric had murmured. Nathan stared at it now, heart hammering slow and hard in his chest. Finally, he tore the flap and spilled its contents onto the desk. Printed emails, meeting notes, confidential memos. His name surfaced over and over, always attached to phrases like strategic redundancy, legacy personnel reduction, non-essential post-sale. They had planned it for a year. Not just cost-cutting, not even incompetence. It had been deliberate. A cold, calculated move to make Corview look leaner, more attractive to buyers, no matter who they gutted along the way. And they had known that without him, the system would fail. They had simply decided they could survive the fallout. Nathan leaned back in his chair, the documents spread before him like a crime scene. For a long time, he felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet, stunned ache, the kind that follows a betrayal so complete it defies language. There was a knock at the door. Daniel Hawthorne stepped in, his usual calm sharpened to something almost electric. Jeffrey Whitmore called, Daniel said without preamble. Westbrook Holdings is officially terminating their contract with Corview. They're ready to move everything to us. Nathan blinked. All 10,000 units? Every single one. They're done waiting. The air shifted. A door closed in one world and swung open in another. But there's more, Daniel continued, voice low. Corview's private equity owners are in panic mode. No buyers. Massive system failures. Their valuation has cratered. Nathan already knew what was coming. Still, hearing it aloud felt like a ripple through his bones. We're preparing an offer, Daniel said. A full acquisition. We buy Corview for a fraction of what they were worth 6 months ago. Nathan exhaled slowly. The company that had discarded him, the one he had built, protected, believed in longer than anyone else, was about to become his responsibility again, only this time under a different flag. Would you lead the integration? Daniel asked. Merge what's salvageable, build something stronger. Nathan didn't answer right away. His mind flickered back. Jason's smirk during the termination meeting, Megan's scripted pity, Tyler Brennan's empty promises. The systems he had designed like veins and arteries, now left to rot. Could he step back into the ruins of what he'd once loved and rebuild it without letting the bitterness hollow him out? Or would the ghost of what had been stolen from him, poison everything he touched? Daniel watched him carefully. "It's your call, Nathan. We won't move without you." Nathan rose from his chair and walked to the window. The city pulsed beneath him, vast and alive. Somewhere out there, Jason Reed was probably still trying to explain the unexplainable to a board that no longer believed in him. Somewhere, the remnants of the old team were scattering to the winds. Claire had once told him that true value isn't just what you build, it's what you're willing to build again after everything falls apart. He turned back to Daniel, the steel setting quietly into his spine. "If we do this," Nathan said, voice steady, "we do it right. Full documentation, full training, no shortcuts, no ego. If it takes longer, it takes longer. If it costs more, it costs more." Daniel nodded without hesitation. "Agreed." Nathan extended his hand. For a moment, he thought of the thousands of tenants relying on systems they couldn't see, the invisible threads tying their lives to something greater. It had never been about recognition. It had always been about building something that mattered. He gripped Daniel's hand firmly. "Let's build it better." That night, alone in his apartment, Nathan pulled out a faded photograph from the bottom of a drawer. It was from the early days at Shoreline Realty. Him, Walter Brennan, and a handful of others, standing proudly in front of a server rack that looked ancient now. They were younger then, naive, full of impossible dreams. He studied his own face, the fierce certainty in his eyes. The world had beaten some of that out of him, but not all of it. Not enough to stop him from trying again. Not enough to stop him from believing that this time, it could be different. Have you ever faced a moment where rebuilding felt more courageous than walking away? How do you know when it's time to begin again? As Nathan prepares to confront the broken legacy of his past, he will discover that some wounds run deeper, and that redemption, like trust, must be rebuilt one piece at a time. Continue to part 3. The old Coreview building loomed against the slate-gray sky, a ghost of itself. The once bustling lobby, with its marble floors and gleaming glass, felt hollow now, the energy stripped away like flesh from bone. Nathan Cross stood at the entrance, hands in his coat pockets, breathing in the strange, sterile air of a place that had forgotten him long before they showed him the door. A new brass plaque gleamed by the elevators. Horizon Systems, Coreview Division. He stepped inside. The transition had taken months of brutal work. Long nights rebuilding corrupted databases, salvaging shattered processes, retraining weary staff who flinched at every change. Some pieces had been lost forever. Some had resisted being saved. But the system now lived again. Not a replica of what he had built before, but something wiser, stronger, crafted with scars in its foundation. Today wasn't about systems, though. Today was about goodbye. Nathan moved through the halls slowly, remembering. Here was the cramped office where he debugged the tenant portal through 2 consecutive Christmas Eves. There was the server room, still humming softly, the heart he had once fed with every ounce of his time, his certainty, his hope. Most of the old leadership was gone. Jason Reed had resigned under a cloud of whispered lawsuits and public humiliation. Megan Ford had quietly moved to a startup in Denver. Tyler Brennan stayed on for a while, but his influence had withered like a leaf in winter. Only a handful of faces from the old days remained, and they greeted him now with cautious warmth, those who remembered the man who had built their shelter and forgiven the ones who had watched him be cast out. At the far end of the corridor, Daniel Hawthorne was waiting, a thin file tucked under his arm. "You ready?" Daniel asked. Nathan gave a small, tired smile. "As I'll ever be." They stepped into the main conference room where the remaining Coreview staff had gathered. Daniel took the floor first, speaking about gratitude, about growth, about second chances. Nathan only half listened. His gaze moved across the room, stopping on faces he had once mentored, argued with, believed in. When Daniel finished, he turned to Nathan, offering him the floor. Nathan didn't prepare a speech. He never needed to. He stepped forward, hands loose at his sides, voice steady. "I built the first version of this system 18 years ago," he said. "I thought if I made it strong enough, intricate enough, it would last forever. I forgot something important. It's not enough to build good systems. You have to build good people around them too." He let the words hang, soft but heavy. "You were part of what made this work once," he continued. "You can be the ones who make it work again. Better, smarter, kinder." He paused, feeling the finality settling around him like the first touch of winter. "This is the last system I'll ever build for someone else," Nathan said quietly. "From now on, I'll be building for the ones who come after us." Daniel smiled at that. A few in the room did too. Not everyone, but enough. Later, after the small reception faded and the sun dropped low over Lake Michigan, Nathan found himself standing alone again on the loading dock where it had all begun for him so many years ago, a battered box in hand, a future uncertain. But this time, there was no box, only a choice. Claire met him by the truck, a thermos of coffee in hand. "You did good," she said, her voice warm against the cold. Nathan shrugged. "I just told the truth. That's more than most people manage." They stood there for a long moment, watching the last light slip away across the water. "Are you ready for what's next?" she asked. Nathan thought of the education division they were building at Horizon, his final gift, maybe the most important thing he'd ever be part of. A place where young engineers would learn that real architecture wasn't about speed or sleekness, but about resilience, about invisible grace. He thought of systems built to last, of people taught to care. "I'm ready," he said. As they drove away from the building, Nathan didn't look back. Some chapters are meant to close completely, not with fanfare or regret, but with a quiet certainty that you have done everything you could, that you left behind something better than you found it. Weeks later, at the launch of Horizon's Technical Education Division, Nathan stood before a room full of young faces, some eager, some skeptical, all about to begin a journey they didn't yet understand. He looked at them and smiled, not with pride, not with sorrow, but with hope, and he began. "Let me tell you about how to build something that matters." What emotion stayed with you the longest after reading Nathan's journey? Hope, sadness, or inspiration? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment 100 if you love this story. Where are you watching from? Share this story with a friend who needs a reminder that real value never fades. Thank you for watching Life Stories.